Even the smaller pieces left behind broke on the following attempts. Since it's quite brittle, I figured it'd probably do well in the hardness test, but this isn't a great test and it just fractures too easily to really know. With the front of the hammer, it's smushed and shattered, so this is no good and even worse than the string. Next up, the oats, which once again look pretty sweet, frozen if I do say so myself, but definitely struggled in testing, although it did split more cleanly and into fewer pieces than the sawdust. It also performed a bit better than the sawdust from the back of the hammer, taking a hit with only minor shattering before breaking up on the second one. With the front of the hammer, it seemed to absorb the hits pretty well, so I'd say this was the best for hardness thus far, although it still wasn't particularly great. Next up was the cotton balls, which I thought seemed promising, but I was concerned about the spacing between the cotton balls where they don't overlap, and I imagine those parts are the most weak and likely to break. To my surprise though, the cotton balls dominated on the first strong test. Sadly, it did break on the second attempt, but the remaining pieces did look quite solid for the next several attempts. I was also pleasantly surprised to see the cotton balls handle the back of the hammer quite well. It did dent a bit, but didn't fracture, and it wasn't a ton of give. With the front of the hammer, where the force is more distributed, it seemed like it might be the superstar material for the ice hammer, at least so far. Next up was the sponge, which handled the first attempt with ease before also breaking on the second attempt. That would have put it tied with the cotton balls until I sadly discovered a Cleveland Browns on a Sunday level performance during the hardness test. The back of the hammer completely embeds every time you strike it for the first time and starts to tear up the material. With the front, it was easily squished, meaning it would make for a terrible hammer, perhaps even worse than the sawdust. Next up, the classic paper towels. I thought it might come in here and wipe the floor with the competition, but sadly it broke during the first attempt. The remaining pieces held up fine though, telling me this was still a decent option, and at least it's more flexible on the size and shape of the strips to cover the surface of the hammer. After being softened up from the collisions and melting a bit, as ice does, it wasn't that impressive in the front side or back side hammer tests, which was surprising to me given how well it worked as a fresh ice cube. Last up, the most hotly anticipated, the asparagus, which was planning to shock the world and become the best material to make the strongest possible ice against all odds. And I was sort of joking there, but after the first attempt it seemed to be doing just that, sticking the first landing on the first try. It actually managed to handle the second and even the third attempt in a rather unique way, not splitting cleanly into 2 or 3 pieces, but rather breaking down just a little bit with each additional throw. Unfortunately, it bombed the hammer test, suffering a similar fate as the sponge, except even worse, as it really started to break down. So unfortunately, the asparagus doesn't seem like a viable option. I thought a clear winner would emerge from this, and I guess that was the cotton balls, but it certainly wasn't decisive. Regardless, that's the first thing I'll try. I stuffed it somewhat tight and tried to overlap the balls as much as possible. Next, I placed it in the freezer till the next day. Once frozen, the hammer looked really good. It lost one of the claws, but that's okay. I started off with relatively light hits on a small nail and was going to increase the strength with each hit. It was looking pretty promising with some nail movement, but it did start to splinter, especially when I had an inaccurate hit on the nail. I almost completed the task, but then disaster struck and the hammer broke at the shaft. I wasn't going to be defeated with such a small amount of the nail left, so I choked up on the hammer and kept pounding, but I didn't have the leverage I used to, and the hammer started to break down even more at the tip, meaning the nail made no progress. In my frustration, I tried some dumb things that I'm not particularly proud of, and unfortunately, I still never got the nail in.